Welcome, everybody, to the Kona Shane Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, Dr. DrAndyRoark. Guys, I'm here today with my good friend, Dr. Jules Benson. He is talking about a new white paper. It's a couple white papers, actually, on brachycephalic dog breeds that have been out in the last couple of months. Guys, this is a fascinating discussion on the dark sides of brachycephalic breeds. This is the real. I love the little guys. Don't get me wrong, but they got real health problems. And in this episode, we talk about a huge data set that Nationwide has put out, talking about the claims that they see in brachycephalics and extreme brachycephalics and how the differences break down between those two types of dogs. What's an extreme brachycephalic, you say? Hang on and you're going to find out. But this is a great episode. We talk about what are the risks. We talk about where they're coming from. We talk about what can we do about them. We talk about how do we approach this as an industry, like what are our options here? How bad is the problem? How severe is it? How great are risks? All those sorts of things. It's really a fun conversation. You're gonna soak it up, I promise. Gang, thanks so much to Nationwide for making this episode available ad-free. Let's get into it.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. DrAndyRoark.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Jules Benson. How are you?
I'm very well, Dr. DrAndyRoark.
Oh, thanks for being here, man. It's so good to talk to you. I always enjoy when we get to catch up.
It's been a long time since we've known each other. It's been the industry's just this small, right?
I was actually thinking that when we got on. How long have I known you? It's been years. Like
it's been a decade, I think. Yeah,
it has been at least 10 years. Did I met you at one of the formal galas? I think that's where I met you at one of the big conferences, and it was like a dinner thing.
There was a glass of wine involved.
Oh, you had this great accent, and I was like, it's like I also have a great accent.
The silly voices, like there's Elmo and there's me, and I think I probably got the better end of that scale.
Love it. Oh, man. So for those who do not know you, you are the Chief Veterinary Officer at Nationwide.
That's true.
And you have been doing a number of really interesting projects. And so you've got some white papers that came out recently that I want to ask you about.
Yes.
And so here's why I want to ask you about this. This is why I was really interested in this topic. So I've been on social media for a long time, and I really like to share a lot of puppy and kitten pictures and kind of joy of practice type stuff. And it's probably been about 8-10 years ago when I would start to post pictures of certain dog breeds. I would get tons and tons and tons of likes, but I always would read through comments or people would send me emails and things. And I started to get some pushback on these beautiful, adorable puppy photos. And they were some very well articulated arguments about me sort of, highlighting these dogs because they were brachycephalic dogs. And at first I was like, you people you need to find some joy in the world. Like who criticizes puppy pictures? Really? How upset do you have to be? And then they continue to come. And as I said, generally, unfortunately, they were very well laid out arguments about the health detriments of brachycephalics and what is our role as veterinarians in. There's a difference in taking care of pets and being accepting of pet owners and being encouraging of this thing that they love, and also not perpetuating breeding habits and things that lead to health problems. And we do have a responsibility in that regard. And those arguments, honestly, this is a place in my life where I initially did not like this position, but I looked at it and I looked at sort of the data and what they were saying, and I ultimately I came over to that side of the table to say, yeah, I still celebrate those pets when they come in, but it's extremely rare for you to find brachycephalics on my social media, not because I don't love them or think that they're wonderful or beautiful, but just because I do have concerns about perpetuating, the short nose in dogs and what that means for their health. And so you guys put out, and it's kind of under your sort of stewardship, these white papers come out from Nationwide talking about brachycephalics and risks of brachycephalics as far as their health and insurance claims that are being made. And so let me just pause right here for a second and say, can you tell me a little bit about the research you guys did and sort of where it came from, just at a high level?
Yeah, for sure. So we started this. One of the nice things about working, in the insurance world, and one of the reasons that I'm still so drawn to it and so passionate about it, is that being an enormous, unapologetic data nerd, there are things that we can do. Like if you think about being in your practice and you can say, okay, how many dogs do we have with pancreatitis?
Right.
You can run, a search for CPLI test that you ran, but you can't really say how much do people spend on pancreatitis within your practice.
Right.
The advantage we have is that when people send their claims in from veterinary clinics, right, so we're getting the information from the clinic, we are typing those claims. So we know that it's pancreatitis, we know that it's brachycephalic, we know that it's pneumonia, right? So we have really good classification of those data. So to me, being able to drill into those data and provide that back to veterinary healthcare teams and owners, that's the real value of what we can bring to the table. So for this, we did some work on cancer last year. We did three papers on cancer. We did one on aging pets. We'll do another aging pets later this year. But brachycephalic was something we wanted to get into just because it continues to be, and I don't know how much you follow the news, especially in the UK, there's a lot of really, I think, positive activism about brachycephalic and about, breed predilections in the UK. Yeah. The British Veterinary Association, to your point around using photos, did a really good job about, I think it's about 10 years ago, providing guidelines to industry of saying that we don't want you to show some of these dogs in these situations, and this is why. It's similar to like using dogs with collars and tags, right? We, for a long time, I think we've had a degree of activism in the industry to say you shouldn't be using pictures of dogs without identification on because it sends the wrong message. And I think this is a similar vein in that of saying, okay, well, so anyway, so we looked at brachycephalic dogs. And we're kind of guided by the data. The way that our team approach it is that we have hundreds of thousands of years of dog data to look at, and then we let the data guide us into, what is most interesting about these. Where are we seeing the spikes in claims activity? Where are we seeing them massive differences between them versus other groups of breeds? So you have to classify those brachycephalic, then compare them against other purebred dogs that don't have that defect, if you like. In terms of that, forcing that soft tissue into a shorter nose but occupying the same space. And so we were always guided by the data. So that's where we arrived at this. And this is kind of where we found we tripped into this extreme brachycephalic space. I don't know if are you familiar with that term before?
I wasn't until I read it in the white paper. So yeah, you break them out into brachycephalics and extreme brachycephalics. So that was actually going to be my first question, is sort of talk to me about that. Talk to me about that distinction.
So we'd done some work on brachycephalics previously, and I think one of the criticisms was you're including some breeds and not others, and why are you doing that, right? And so I think we wanted to take a really science-based approach to this. And so in the white paper, and actually there's a methodology that goes along with it, we identify the 15 or so brachycephalic breeds that we use in the analysis, and those are all breeds that were identified in at least 3 peer-reviewed papers. Okay. So as we started looking at this, we noticed among the data there were some pretty big differences between a few of the breeds. And the peer-reviewed papers, several of them referred to extreme phenotypes and were classifying those quote-unquote extreme brachycephalics. Okay. And so whenever I present on these data and I ask people, what are the extreme brachycephalic breeds that you would expect coming out of this, people nail it, right? It's French Bulldogs, it's English Bulldogs, and it's Pugs. Yeah. And the diversion of those in the data is massive. Like and you can see in the white paper, I know you've taken a look at it, we could talk about some of the numbers, but just talking about brachycephalic dogs en masse, I think is misleading unless you're breaking them out into because it really is specific breeds who are driving, the difference in claims activity among that class of breeds.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How when you look at brachycephalics in general, it's because you guys look at you get claims from every different type of breed, and so it's really great. One of my favorite things you guys do is put out just most popular breeds every year, and it's just it seems like an easy data pool for you. But I'm always fascinated in what are the breeds that people are bringing into the clinics. And so, talk to me a little bit about the popularity of brachycephalic dogs. Like, where are these in the frequency of the patients that we're seeing?
So overall, brachycephalic breeds, and we looked over the past decade or so, and we said, okay, from 2013 to 2022, what is the change in popularity, if any, of brachycephalic breeds overall, right? So we're talking about everything: boxers, cavaliers, Lhasa Apso, French Bulldogs. Is there a change in overall population? And there was a little bit of a bump. It was about 19% to 21% of our purebred dogs.
Okay.
So there was a bit of a change there. But when you actually break those out into extreme versus non-extreme brachycephalics, the positions are pretty much switched. It used to be that the non-extreme brachycephalics were much more popular, and over the past 10 years, that has reversed, and we've seen a massive change in the upswing of extreme brachycephalics, and that is driven, frankly, by one breed. So the French Bulldog over the past 10 years it was 19th most popular purebred that we insured in 2013, and it is now the 3rd most popular breed.
Wow, that's I mean, meteoric rise, right? To go from 19 to 3 in 10 years,
a 5 times increase in the popularity of the breed in that book. So it's stratospheric, and it's happened fairly gradually, like over that time. Hasn't just been, because I think we think about like those fads, right? The Chihuahua, Beverly Hills Chihuahua. Like we see those things, and there's just, like overnight, suddenly there's a million more of these dogs. But for Frenchies, it's been pretty gradual over the past 10 years. But it's problematic. I mean, it's and we can talk about the data, but it's I think the normalization of some of the behaviors that we see and some of the health issues that we see. I think it's a really tough situation, and you and I've talked about this before, being in the clinic with people who all they wanted to do was get a dog that they want to bring in their home and love and everything else, and we know that sometimes pet families aren't always doing all the research they can, or they're so captivated by the persona they see in the media or whatever else, that there's not always a good heart versus head conversation going on.
Well, at this point, it's sort of a self-perpetuating cycle, right? Like if you like, say, Frenchies, they're everywhere. And so how could they be a problematic, like how could this be a problem when I just see them everywhere? People wouldn't have them all over the place if they were a dog that had health problems. And I understand people just kind of having that immediate knee-jerk reaction. This isn't some strange, rare breed you never see. These are one of the most common breeds out there. They've got to be a good, healthy, vibrant breed. And you go, that doesn't, no.
It's funny, we'll talk a little bit later perhaps about how do we help this, but I think the popularization and even watching the Super Bowl ads, right? I think it was Miles Teller and his girlfriend were dancing around like super fun ad of them having a great time with their Frenchie.
Yeah,
and not that can't happen. It's just one of those situations of like, how do you insert yourself awkwardly into that conversation and say, hey, fun police here.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah. I don't like to be that too. Even as I said that last line, I'm like, I don't know. You see people and they love their little Frenchie, and the Frenchie is an adorable, happy little dog. And you say, I don't want to be the fun police. And especially waiting until someone has made the lifetime commitment of the pet to then say, oh, by the way, let me tell you some bad news. That doesn't feel good either. Now, I want to, before we leave, I want to take this and turn it around into an action steps. Like, how do we, without stomping on people's hearts, like, and while still maintaining the trust and relationship that's going to get them to bring their pet back so we can continue to work with them. Like, what is it useful for us to say to them? But before we get into that, I want to just pause here for a second and say, we're speaking in these vague terms about problems and claims sort of spiking up. Lay out for me, what are the risks specifically that we're talking about? So
I think it's the white paper kind of delves into this in more detail, but very generally, when we look at the category of things like respiratory disease or respiratory. Is that how you guys say it?
Respiratory is how I say it, yeah. I also say brachycephalic. As you say brachycephalic, and we're clearly...
I was recording something
I'm not
today,
yielding on this.
I think I said brachycephalic and brachycephalic 2 sentences apart, and I'm like, I have to go back in because I have no idea how to say this anymore. So I think I say brachycephalic. So if you look at the respiratory disease category, right, and we're talking about everything from infectious, tracheobronchitis to pneumonia, like all of those diseases, in extreme brachycephalic dogs compared to non-brachycephalic purebred dogs, they are 5 times more likely to submit a claim for respiratory disease. 5 times. For ocular disease, it's about the same. They're about 5 times more likely to submit a claim for ocular disease. So these two syndromes, we could talk about in more detail, brachycephalic ocular syndrome, which frankly I wasn't that familiar with. I just assumed that, when I see those exophthalmic dogs, they're going to have problems. But apparently, this has been looped into a syndrome now, brachycephalic ocular syndrome. And then the other biggie really is brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, right? Which I think, to me, that's the most terrifying area, because when we look at brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, you can't compare the rates of disease in brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome with non-brachycephalic dogs, because it doesn't exist. That was always terrifying to me, of saying, like, we're looking at, so we compared extreme brachycephalics to non-extreme brachycephalics, and those extreme brachycephalics, of those, the French Bulldog is 17 times more likely to submit a claim for brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome than all the other dogs that still have brachycephalic, phenotypes.
That's mind-blowing. Like 17 times more than the other brachycephalic dogs.
And 1,000,000 times more than the non-brachycephalic dogs that don't have brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome at all, right? So again, like that's the leap for me, is that we're not just saying it's much more common in these dogs, we're saying it exists exclusively in this group of dogs. And these dogs, this particular breed, are 17 times more likely than the rest of them to get it. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And so for BOAS, the other thing that we looked at specifically was, if dogs are affected by BOAS, are they more sick in other areas? So so we compared BOAS Frenchies with non-BOAS Frenchies, and it gets worse. So if you have a Frenchie with BOAS, they're 5 times more likely to have a claim for pneumonia than a non-BOAS Frenchie.
Yeah.
They're twice as likely to have a claim for spinal disease as a non-BOAS Frenchie. So these really extreme affected dogs, they're not just sick with BOAS, they're more sick with other conditions as well.
Well, I'm really surprised by the spinal condition, right? So it makes total sense. If you've got, so the brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome is like hypoplastic trachea, elongated soft palate, everted laryngeal saccules, stenotic nares, right? Like tiny little nostrils. And so unless I'm wrong, those are the 4 sort of pieces of it. And so if you have those things, then it makes sense that you're more likely to have pneumonia, right? You're not
esophageal disease with the negative pressure. Yeah, exactly.
So those things make sense. I completely understand. You get some sort of respiratory, like possibly kennel cough that advances, secondary disease following that. That all makes sense to me. But spinal abnormalities is not something that I would immediately say, oh, that makes sense.
Well, and so talking to neurologists, we talked to a board certified neurologist about this, and when I was at school, we were told that the Dachshunds were the poster breed for IVDD, right, for vertebral disc disease. And I think, again, this is a stat out of thin air that I was told, but the Dachshunds have a prevalence 10 times all other dogs kind of rolled together, like it was that extreme. And you look at it now, we'll have data on IVDD coming out later this year, but now they're similar. So Frenchies and Dachshunds, absolutely.
No,
so the prevalence of IVDD,
with a feather. No.
Yeah. And when we talk to neurologists, they say that the degree of disease anecdotally from what they've seen is more severe in the Frenchies than it is in the Dachshunds.
I have not been talking about this in the exam at all. I still talk to the Dachshund owners when they come in their Dachshund puppy, and it's sort of that, it's wonderful pet. Let me just tell you what I recommend for all my Dachshund owners, just to cover our bases. I have not been leaning into that with my brachycephalics.
Yeah. And so and again, it's Frenchies more than others, but actually, we see it in some of the English Bulldogs as well. And we see, and we haven't even talked about eyelid disease or heat stroke or any of those other types of things, but they're also amplified in dogs with BOAS. So the BOAS dogs, we've had some really interesting, and the so what out of this, right? Like, what does this mean, or what can we do about it? I mean, I think having these conversations, even like IVDD, like I wasn't really aware of it either, because I haven't been in practice full time for 10 years. And so I haven't seen this explosion of dogs, and I haven't seen, what apparently, the clinicians say to me, like, yeah, it's Frenchies and IVDD. That's exactly what we're seeing now. Yeah. And so I think getting the word out there, enabling clinicians to have better high quality conversations, and for us, taking some of the pressure off clinicians by providing the data and saying, hey, look, look at these data. Like this isn't just me and my experience. This is, hundreds of thousands of dogs, and this is what we see. And let's create an awareness plan and an action plan from that. And so everything from, those dogs with the ocular syndrome, even down to if they have extreme exophthalmos or lagophthalmos, like talking about dogs, like if you're going outside, or talking about, topicals, like long-term, even educating pet owners. You know what it's like when you say to them, when they call in and they say, does the eye seem painful? And they're like, I don't know, it's red. And it's like helping them understand the difference between, injected sclera and what a painful, like, corneal scratch looks like. I think getting that education up front, I think will save eyes and will save people, time and money. And then around the respiratory disease, I think just helping them understand, like, what they're looking at, and in the kindest possible way, denormalizing this, right? This is, as much as this is something that is known in the breed, the snuffliness and the inability to breathe in certain situations, helping them understand that you should not be outside with your dog in extreme heat, that you should not be exercising your dog in humidity, that these are things that are actually dangerous to the health of your dog. And then even as we look at the other thing the data told us was that for Frenchies especially, it's a disease of young dogs. We're seeing those claims come in 75% of the time in dogs under 2 years of age. So having a valuable conversation about early intervention, and we've talked to some researchers in Brazil and a couple of others who are, I think that the jury is out fully on the full benefit, but early surgical intervention with some of these extreme brachycephalics may actually lead to better outcomes. So maybe one of those situations of, and perineal urethropathy is the one we talked about, right? Is an early surgical intervention actually better long term than waiting for the 3 strikes on the block cat? So I think this is a similar situation, it looks like, and we're still digging into the data on that.
So let's start to talk about taking this in a positive direction, right? Let's talk about action steps. Let's talk about education. We've already talked about when people come in and they've got these pets and they are excited about their new English Bulldog, their new Frenchie, their new pug. I don't want to, like, that's not the time necessarily to talk about choosing your breed after they've chosen their breed. So talk to me, if you had your magic wand and you were going to alter the way that sort of veterinary medicine is talking, educating, working with pet owners right now, how do you start to approach this? Like, what are some ways where you feel like we can make some inroads to start to as you said, denormalize the brachycephalics, which I like your way of putting that.
And I think you're right. There's 2 aspects to it. There's how do we with all the love in our hearts and all our professionalism, how do we talk to the owners of pets, of these pets who already have them, right? Because we're not suggesting they give them back or like rehome them, whatever else. Like you've made that decision. Let's help you have the best life with your pet possible. And so I think it's exactly that. It's as early on as possible, having a conversation, raising their awareness of the abnormalities within the breed, of basically saying, hey, you've got a breed, great personality, but there are some known issues with that. And I don't think it's that much different from talking to a Great Dane owners about orthopedic disease. Mm-hmm. They're like, the people choose their breeds and there are issues with them. Some people know them, some people don't. I think making sure people are aware of the diseases and of what the signs are of when veterinary intervention should be called on. Like, people don't know what heat stroke looks like. Heat stroke is incredibly dangerous. Mm. And if people don't know the first steps to take, same thing with eye stuff. Like, I mean, the people letting eye stuff go, that's how you lose an eye with a dog like this, right? And the same thing with respiratory disease. Even making them aware of, there's things that we use for cardiac disease, resting respiratory rate. Like, we can use that for compromise of the respiratory system as well. Like, if you're looking at your dog, hey, just take 20 seconds and count their breaths. How does it look compared to last week, compared to last month, compared to the month before? Just getting them into the habit of being aware that there are issues with their dogs. So I think that's the first side of it. The second side is it possible to decrease the popularity of these dogs? And again, this isn't us being the morality police, but this is, can we reduce the overall suffering or increase the welfare of the dogs under our care? And I think I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people in this space, and I think there's some great thoughts around more responsible breeding programs. I think the issue with that is that while there's still $1 to be made, I think irresponsible breeding programs will continue to crop up everywhere, right? As long as you can sell a French Bulldog puppy for $5,000, I think you can talk to good breeders until you're blue in the face. And I love that OFA are bringing out a brachycephalic scoring index to try and increase the health of the offspring. But I think it does come down to trying to sway the public and just having conversations, exactly to your point around, hey, if I'm thinking of getting a new dog, if you have the chance to intervene and to have a conversation about, the dogs that people are thinking about getting, and people loving the personalities, again, just encouraging them to look at the data, to know what they're getting into, and having that emotional, financial, and, just overall management aspects of having a brachycephalic dog with BOAS or with brachycephalic ocular syndrome. It's a lot for people, and sometimes they don't know what they're getting into. So I think if they see the personality, there are other breeds that we could suggest that have similar personalities that don't have some of the same problems.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I'm going to see if I can run down the OFA Brachycephalic Scoring Index, and I'll also put links to the white papers in the show notes here. Are there other resources that you really like that you'd point out?
I think the other side of this is that we're trying to build this base of evidence-based medicine, really to try and drive spectrum of care decisions. So I know that Dr. Emily Tincher came on and talked to you about that a little while ago and encouraged people to check out that episode. But really, I mean, we can go to thespectrumofcare.com, which we'll put in the show notes. But I think that gives a really good insight as to another reason why we're doing this. It really is about education about owners, but it's also about what are the best courses of treatment. So looking for the evidence base around things like early surgical intervention, for example.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I'll definitely link that up as well. Jules, where can people find you online? Where can they follow you?
LinkedIn is where I do most of my damage these days, and people are welcome. Anything that we have that's new, and I think it's worth saying that I think the white papers, we love the work we're doing there, and we love the stuff we're translating into the space. But great to keep an eye on us. I think later this year we'll be making that more accessible for more breeds, more veterinary healthcare teams, and more pet families. So we're really excited about the work that we're doing and kind of what's coming down the pike. So watch this space.
That's fantastic to hear. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Guys, thanks for tuning in and listening. Everybody take care of yourselves.
Thanks, Andy.
And that is our episode, guys. That's what I got. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Jules for being here. Thanks again for Nationwide for making this episode possible. Guys, take care of yourselves. Be well. I'll talk to you soon.